Greetings, everyone. Thank you for joining us for this World Refugee Day webinar. We are so happy that you're able to connect with us and be able to hear our speakers who will be focusing on libraries supporting displaced persons, international guidelines, and global experiences. And this webinar is co-organized by the Mortenson Center for International Library Programs, the American Library Association, and the International Federation of Library Associations and Institutions. And we will be coordinating this with various people. And so as we get started, we'll be able to introduce you to the various people. But before we get too far along with the session, then we like to begin today with a land acknowledgement. So though we're connecting virtually, I would like to begin today by recognizing and acknowledging that I join you from the lands of the Peoria, Kaskaskia, Piankashaw, Wea, Miami, Mascoutin, Ottawa, Sauk, Meskwaki, Kickapoo, Potawatomi, Ojibwe, and Chickasaw nations. These lands were the traditional territory of these native nations prior to their forced removal. These lands continue to carry the stories of these nations and their struggles for survival and identity. As a member of the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign, I take the responsibility to acknowledge the peoples of these lands, as well as the histories of dispossession that have allowed for the growth of this institution. And so the overview for today is I'm doing the brief welcome. Clara Chu, Director of the Mortenson Center. And then from there, Peggy Nzomo, who is International Library Initiative Specialist at the Mortenson Center, will be then introducing the speakers, which will be followed by the presentations. The Q&A will be moderated by Derek Wilmot Montoya, a representative from the ALA, and then the wrap up and thank you will be done by Peggy Nzomo. And so where does this collaboration and this work begin and our interest in advancing services to refugees and displaced persons? So the work that has been taking place has been done by various professional associations, IFLA, ALA, and so forth. And so many years ago, we started to do this work, knowing that the Syrian refugees were a particular group that we were quite concerned about. And so the ALA with the Mortenson Center worked together on a project called Project Welcome, where we were able to do various things. We had a summit and we were able to learn across different experiences in the world. We had international librarians learning with national librarians here in the US. And then from there, we were able to learn all the work that was going on to not duplicate and to identify good practices. So we have a website, and from that website, then we also were able to generate a particular framework for services to refugees. And this work was funded by the Institute of Museum and Library Services that currently it's not funding any grants because the agency has been closed for the moment by the current government. And so just to let you know about the framework, so we have this framework which focuses on 4 areas. So I invite you to get familiar with those as part of the services that you might consider providing to refugees and asylum seekers and displaced persons. And now I'll turn it over to Peggy.
Good evening, good morning, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. As Clara has said, I'm Peggy Nzomo. I work at the Mortenson Center for International Library Programs. I am going to go ahead and introduce all our speakers all at once and tell you a little bit about them so that we have a smooth transitioning when the presentations start. First of all, I'm going to start with Despina, who is our headline speaker. She is Community Mobilization and Capacity Building Consultant with IFLA. Despina has been working in the library field for the past 15 years with a focus on international librarianship since 2017 when she joined IFLA. Currently, her work is focused on IFLA's regional structure, community mobilization, and capacity building. She has co-authored the IFLA guidelines for libraries supporting displaced persons, which she's going to talk to us about today. And next is Magdalena Gomulka, and she is a curator in the Silesian Library in Katowice in Poland. She is a member of Polish Librarians Association. Her 14 years of professional experience includes working as a cataloger and instructor, coordinating work of public libraries in the Silesia region in Poland. She's an active participant and presenter about Polish libraries at national and international conferences, including IFLA. And next we will have Lisa Hussey, who is professor at Simmons University School of Library and Information Science. Dr. Lisa Hussey, as part of her work, serves as the coordinator of international programs at SLIS. She has led travel courses to Seoul as part of SLIS's partnership with the Yonsei University in South Korea, and also in Rwanda in collaboration with the Maranyundo Institution in Boston. As a result of her work as part of her travel courses, Lisa has had the opportunity to work with several school libraries in Rwanda, including the School of Leadership SOLA in Kigali, and she's going to talk about that today. Last but not least, we have Anna Ndumu. Dr. Ndumu is assistant professor at University of Maryland College Park College of Information. And she primarily researches and teaches on library services to immigrants with a focus on Black diasporic immigrants, along with methods of promoting racial realism and representation in LIS. Since 2021, Dr. Ndumu has led Libraries Integration and New Americans Project, and she recently launched the Immigration, International, and Information Research Alliance, I3R. She is the editor of Borders and Belonging, Critical Examinations of Library Service to Immigrants, and coordinator of the Black Librarian in America, Reflections, Resistance, and Reawakening. Welcome to all our speakers, and without much further ado, I'd like to welcome Despina to start us off. Despina, take it away.
Thank you very much. Let me share my screen, and please tell me if you see my screen. You see, right? Thank
Yes.
you. Okay.
Yes.
So thank you very much, Dr. Chu and Peggy Nsomo, for actually inviting us and spotlighting the IFLA guidelines for this year's commemoration of the World Refugee Day. I'd also like to acknowledge two women superheroes, Nancy Bolt and Maja Rakocevic-Udovic, the former and current chair of the IFLA section on equitable and accessible library services, which was the section that published just a few months ago the IFLA guidelines for libraries supporting displaced persons. So as Peggy mentioned, I co-authored the guidelines, and myself and the other authors do hope that they are already helping libraries and librarians out there. So as you understand, I won't be able to talk about the whole details that are included in these guidelines, but I'll try to walk you through some highlights, and hopefully at the end you'll get some key practical takeaways and some inspiration. But before I unfold the guidelines, I find it very useful to start the discussion around inclusivity with a question to ourselves and to our teams. So if libraries are the living room of the society, who is missing a seat? And in particular, who is missing the opportunity to have a seat in this communal living room? So inclusive services always begin with asking, or should begin with asking, who are we excluding? And I really like Tony Ruth's Equity series, inspired by this book, The Giving Tree. And I'd like to explain this a little bit to you. So let's say the tree here represents the library, and the apples are everything that the library offers. So information, connection, culture, internet access, and so on. I'll call the person on the left red and the person on the right blue. So in the first image here, inequality, we see that the tree is leaning, and this gives the red easy access while the blue struggles. So we, of course, talk here about unequal access to opportunities. Then inequality, we see that both get ladders, but again, the way the library, the tree, is leaning still makes the red have more opportunities. In equity here, we give extra tools to the blue person, extra tools to level the access. But actually, finally, it's justice that means fixing the tree, so fixing the library as a system and giving both the right tools and fixing the library means we give the right opportunities for everyone to participate in enjoying the library fruits. And participation here is a key term. And now I'll share an exclusion example. And let's say you work you're a librarian and you work at the front desk day, and a refugee walks in the library and wants to borrow a book or a DVD or something else, but they lack proof of address. So what would you do? Well, first of all, communicate clearly that library is not a checkpoint. Libraries are accessible and welcoming places for all, but you have to be loud. And also you have to be flexible. So accept alternative documentation. There are libraries that do that, like refugee membership cards, or even some libraries do not even require at all official papers for electronic access, or give some instant library cards with limitations, or even automatic fee amnesty for books not returned by refugees. So this justice bit of the leaning tree, the leaning library, is one of the main aims of the guidelines and why they matter. Refugee numbers have doubled since 2016, based on statistics from the Global Refugee Forum in 2023, and nearly half of school-age refugees are out of school. So the guidelines also serve as a vehicle to expand the traditional role of librarianship, seeing libraries filling this gap by supporting emotional recovery, creating inclusive safe spaces, fostering intercultural learning. And when this is done right, libraries do strengthen both displaced and host communities through cross-cultural engagement and the appreciation of cultural diversity. So thus, they become places for social cohesion, and they become safe havens for healing, learning, and connection. So how did we start the guidelines? A few years ago. So we wanted actually to see how do libraries serve the world in the global displacement. So first of all, we wanted to map what's going out there, what's happening out there. So we launched a global survey, and we also conducted some interviews, three out of which now are our case studies inside the guidelines, and they come from 3 different regions, Asia, Oceania, Europe, and the USA. Maybe in the future, if there is a second version, or we can also add more regions, that would be wonderful, really. And the way that the guidelines are structured, they are structured across these chapters. So you will find inside guidelines around services and programs, policies, staff training, partnerships, needs assessment and evaluation, challenges and solutions. Of course, the guidelines are grounded in international frameworks like the UN 2030 Agenda, as they reflect many of the SDGs. Of course, the Montreal 2022 Declaration, putting culture as a common public good, and cultural resources as our global commons. And of course, the rights, the human rights that we all have are inherent to ourselves simply because we are born as human beings. They cannot be taken away from us nor be given to us. So they also reflect on the right, of course, of access to information, freedom of expression, and cultural identity. So needs assessment. Of course, every library, when it starts the process of service design, needs assessment is very important. But in particularly here for refugees, displacement, we should note that isn't uniform. So refugees are in different phases. Their situation varies a lot from country to country, even from region to region inside the same country. So some are in a state of limbo, others have arrived seeking long-term refuge, and many are coping with trauma from recent experiences of violence. So each are at a different stage in their journey. So this really means that libraries must assess needs locally and adjust their services accordingly. And here I have an example of assessing the countries and the languages. So a good way of assessing the needs is actually, first of all, to check which countries do your refugees come from. So look for governmental data, NGOs data, do site inspection in refugee camps. First of all, check the countries, and then go to platforms such as Translators Without Borders to cross-check which languages do people from those countries speak. And then this will help you build a lot of the services I'll talk about later. Evaluation, of course, is very important as well, as it is raising awareness with the public and with donors for long-term projects and long-term planning for the library. So evaluation, qualitative, of course, and quantitative. So services in multiple languages is key here. Of course, also anonymous surveys, because we are referring here to vulnerable populations of our society. Some might face persecution and so on. And then tell your story, share the human impact. Inclusion needs commitment, so you have to do that on a stable basis. Now, language is one of the biggest barriers and the first thing that you see when you open these guidelines. So after you will have identified which languages your refugee speak in the region your library is located at, then there are many things that libraries do or can do. So build a small or big multilingual collection, put it at the front of the library as a welcoming gesture. Another important bit is use pictograms, inclusive communication, visual communication. Here we see some nice examples from the Public Library of Ghent in Belgium, and above the collection, both reading and audiobooks in Norway and Sweden. Of course, also recruit refugees as translators, hire them as translators. And there are even some libraries around the world that use handheld mobile translation devices for their front desk staff that help them communicate with refugees and displaced persons. So, and language cafe conversation groups, which I'm very sure you are pretty aware of, and many libraries do this now, these days, turning actually language from a barrier to a bridge, I would say. Well, we work with libraries where librarians' knowledge is survival. We know that. But especially legal literacy is a burning matter for refugees. So I would put that first. And of course, librarians are not legal advisors, but they can be the mediator. They can connect. These are the people who connect the community. So librarians and lawyers actually is working together is a well-promising relationship. So what libraries could do is offer free notary slots or legal clinics inside the library on specific days, partnering with legal aid groups or the regional bar associations. Another example is here that we see on the photo is Knowing Your Rights card. These are business size cards from the Seattle Public Library. On the front is the name in multiple languages, currently in 18 languages. On the front is the name of the right, and then on the back there are some practical applications of the rights in everyday life. And of course, there are many other things that matters that refugees need information about, and this will actually be informed from your needs assessment, like job hunting, housing, health, and so on. There are many events that libraries, of course, can do to support refugees and foster social cohesion through events that involve actually both host and displaced communities. I'll shed here the light on two standout examples. The first one is from the picture also I am using. So it's the Brussels libraries. They did in 2019 multilingual reading hours on moving trams and buses. And the second one is that libraries that actually have created spaces inside the libraries as stress relief stations with mental also health books. So some staff even were trained in basic mental health first aid. and showing that libraries also can serve as places of both learning and cross-cultural engagement and healing. And cross-cultural engagement can also, of course, happen through other events like multicultural cooking, in case you have kitchen in your library. Technological access is also survival. Digital literacy is pretty essential, of course, as we all know that. Of course, apart from free Wi-Fi, access to computers and laptops and training, which indeed help bridge the digital divide, libraries could also create flyers in multiple languages describing what is the library and where is the library. Remember that refugees might come from places where there is either no library culture or there's a different library culture. So here you need to assess that and decide actually what is the best way to communicate what is the library and where is the library located. Then print these in small QR codes and actually go to them, print them and put them in places they hang out, refugee camps, tram stations, laundromats, and so on. So, of course, take the library to the people, to refugees with pop-up library spots and with your mobile buses. Don't wait for them to come to you. Go to them first. Another thing I want to mention here is from our case study, the Denver Public Library. It was called Mementos from Home, and this is a ring that the woman was carrying from home. As a refugee. So, and there are refugee podcasts on their website, and she was sharing her story, saying how important this ring, what it means to her, and saying, here I am, this is me. Policy is, of course, how values become practice. Therefore, inclusion should be codified in policies. I talked earlier about the no ID-based policy for library cards, but there are so many other policies that libraries can actually embed in their systems, and there is a whole section in the guidelines. You can read more about that. But libraries just need to be clearer and louder that everyone is welcome. And that means that clear commitments to serving all, regardless of their status. And also maintaining a privacy policy protection is very important because, again, we're talking about vulnerable populations and vulnerable patrons. On the right side here, you see some job titles and job and library departments currently in operation across the world. Of course, reflecting inclusion in strategic planning is crucial. So support for displaced communities must be embedded in long-term goals as part of your core mission. Inclusion is not a side project, and this will also help long-term planning and funding also. And as I like to say, is that inclusive services to support displaced population is like brushing our teeth. It has to be done daily. It is not done once and done. We have to repeat it every day. Therefore, putting it in libraries' mission is very important. So inside the guidelines, you'll find many things about training. For example, creating a team of staff who are willing to deploy a plan on how to actually do training and to staff. And here I just put some bullet points of some staff training topics, but I'd really like to talk about the first bullet point, the self-care training. Because we know that compassion fatigue and burnout are real challenges in any helping profession. So here there is an opportunity for libraries to work with social workers and psychologists to offer self-care training for staff to avoid burnout. So equip your staff to serve with empathy and self-care and not just effort. We all know that prepared staff make really the difference. The partnership speed is quite crucial, and it's also crucial for funding purposes. So we know that libraries lack funding, but with long-term 5-10 years planning with partners, this probably could be the solution. So I have here added an insightful example from Prince George County Memorial Library System, and I'm very glad that I see actually a participant here today. And they have created this Excel. I actually deleted the rows, what it was inside under the colors you see, but they have actually here mapped the humanitarian organizations in the region and which organizations they work in. I find really these categories very clever and a very nice also way of raising awareness among staff, because this is shared among staff. Of course, here partnerships is very crucial to co-design services with refugees themselves, and we know that if we do that, we build relevant and respectful support. For example, some libraries create advisory boards with refugees, and others hire them as consultants, as we said, for either translation or service design. So this is my last slide. I started today by telling you that the words from shelves to shelter, and I'd like to add to that from learning to caring. We live in a world of global displacement, and if libraries want to keep being relevant and important in this world, they must learn how to serve this world. But maybe one thing we can hold as a conclusion is that actually we shall begin to unlearn in order to be able to serve the world. So unlearn our processes, our rules, our prohibitions, and our prejudices about ourselves and about the others, in order to allow ourselves to experience fully the world in partnership with our communities. I close with this phrase, this quote by the British woman poet George Eliot: "What do we live for if it is not to make life less difficult to each other?" And another quote from a public librarian who contributed to our pre-survey. They said, "Communities need more than just information to survive. They need connection, support, and hand-holding. And this is undeniably the most important thing libraries do." To finish, really now, when it was about time to decide the visual identity of the guidelines, the point of departure was this image you see on the left, with people holding hands in a circle, which then led to our final image, which shows a ripple of concentric circles. This represents the multiplier effect of one caring action, of one caring library, I would say, of one caring librarian. Libraries and librarians do have the power to make that societal ripple happen, leading with humanity and serving with empathy, ultimately heading towards a better planetary well-being. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Despina, for that presentation. And now next, without much further ado, we'll have Magdalena Gomulka. Her presentation is titled Ukrainians in Poland: How did libraries help refugees? Welcome, Magda.
Oh, yes. Hello, everyone. Again, very nice. I'm very proud for invitation. I come from Poland and I work in the public library. Today, I will be talking about the experience of Polish librarians in helping displaced Ukrainian citizens. And I would also like to explain more the social context behind this topic and what we have learned since 2022. That's right, 3 years have passed since the Russian Federation attacked Ukraine on February 24th, 2022. There wasn't even time to think, and Poland opened its arms without hesitations and gave Ukrainians the right to work, to attend schools, and to receive social benefits. According to the UN, when the war began, 10.4 million Ukrainians fled across the border to Poland. 1 year later, there were 1.6 million refugees in Poland. It was the highest number in European countries. And this year, there are almost 1 million Ukrainians here. And based on the government data, we can see that the biggest group comprises women with one child or two children below 18 years old. Moreover, every second refugee is an Ukrainian child. The researchers show that the refugees came to big cities where they could stay with in Ukrainian friends' houses. And what we found out that about the occupation, that in 44% of refugees, they are educated specialists and executives as well as blue-collar workers. We can ask, was Poland prepared for such situation? No. And did any library have experience in working with refugees? No, we didn't. And I can see that at the beginning of the work, libraries reacted very quickly and intuitively. They organized charitable events and offered library services. The scale of this reaction was really impressive. For example, in my region, 46% of public libraries organized events and helped Ukrainian refugees. What was the most important at the beginning of the war, during these first days? The main important role of the libraries was be a kind of a store where, especially in rural libraries and villages, people brought clothes, cosmetics, stationery, and art supplies. All these things were packed and delivered to the shelters. And it is important to mention about two examples of campaign which were organized in libraries. First example is in public library in Iława. It's on the west of Poland. Librarians, together with citizens, prepared welcoming packs for Ukrainian women. When you find out about the war, you have just a few minutes to pack the most important things and leave your home. And people thought that this welcoming pack with underwear, with cosmetics, and the most important things will be really important during first days in another country. And this activity was called Woman to Woman, and also was organized because of the Women's Day celebrated on March 8th in Poland. Another action organized for Women's Day was in public library in Radom. And librarians and citizens collected torches instead of flowers and packed all of them and transported to Ukraine. And I would like to mention that many libraries, together with local governments, organize charity events, such as concerts and auctions, whose income was given to help Ukraine. If we dive into the topic, we can see that local public libraries were a kind of a local information desks where Ukrainians could find out about accommodation, about public transport, some hospitals and schools. They also could fill in all the documents connected, allowing them to stay in Poland with the help of librarians. And also, if they had to take a photo for ID documents, they could do that in public libraries because some of them offered it for free. In this picture, you can see computers with keyboards. Many public libraries had keyboards with Ukrainian alphabet, and they got it from the companies. And it really helped them to find information. We all know that the worst thing for refugees is isolation, and language courses organized in majority of public libraries, both in the cities and rural libraries, gave opportunity to Ukrainians to learn basic of Polish. It was really important for looking for a new job, but it's not only that. These meetings were also possibilities to meet other Ukrainians and talk with them and also have a cup of tea. When parents were learning Polish, there was a special, in libraries, there was a special task for librarians, which they organized some activities for children. So they were learning together with children, playing games, drawing, painting, and watching some movies. It's when we talk about libraries, we also need to mention about the books. In many public libraries in Poland, there were collections of Ukrainian books. These collections were built with the help of Literature Institute, Book Institute in Poland, and also a big donation from publishing houses and companies. And as a result, 85,000 of libraries, 85,000 of books were in 450 public libraries in Poland. Last but not least, there is a special project which was organized by Information Society Development Foundation, and it started in 2022 and it still is on. Library for All. This project allows children from Ukraine and Poland to learn, play, make friends, and make education career. As you could see from previous slides, at the beginning of the war, public libraries did a lot, and they did very quickly and tried to help Ukrainian refugees. Later, they saw that there are different areas they had to take care, and also library could be a perfect place for meetings and developments for children from Ukraine, and also to integrate with Polish teenagers. This project invited children, teenagers and adults and parents of Ukrainian refugees, and they could find out more about new areas of learning, about coding, about literature, about art. They could also meet other teenagers from not only from Ukraine but also from Poland, and share their knowledge about their country, and also find out more about Polish tradition and history. A very important element of this project is a knowledge base with educational materials where librarians can use and do it during their activities. Important part of this project Library for All is they are researchers. They are organized by public schools, public libraries and foundation, and also local governments. Researchers show that Ukrainian teenagers really need a space which will be without any rules, just only for that. Because at schools they don't have it. Very often teachers don't have such time to take care about Ukrainian pupils. And what's more, Ukrainian pupils, they also attend to Ukrainian online school, so they are really busy. Creating a safe space in the library gave them opportunity to do something more, to do something, just something different, and also meet other people. Another important element of this research and then of this project was that they took parents to the libraries and also attended in art classes and meetings with psychologists and other Ukrainians. So this project is a really good example of how libraries can integrate Polish and Ukrainian societies and get a possibility to meet. Summarizing my presentation, I really see that Polish libraries reacted incredibly well for the situation of the war and tried to help refugees as they can, and they also showed that they are good partners for society. And what is really important, that it's not over. Librarians want to develop this knowledge and still cooperate with refugees and develop their library services. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Magda. A lot of thank yous in the chat for you and also for Despina. And next, we are going to have Lisa. Her presentation is titled School of Leadership Afghanistan, SOLA Library, Working with Afghan Girls in Rwanda. Welcome, Lisa.
Thank you. I'm just going to talk a little bit about the school that I worked with and the purpose of the school and the girls that I worked with. And as you see here, this is actually straight from the website for SOLA. And the intent of the school, or the purpose of the school, was it was actually established by Shabana, and it was established in Afghanistan. She had been an exchange student to the United States during, after 20 years ago. I'm trying to think of the timeline. And when she was trying to originally have more girls become exchange students to the US, and realized that if she really wanted to develop future female leaders in Afghanistan, she needed to actually work in Afghanistan. And she established SOLA outside of Kabul as a boarding school. And as we all know, when the Taliban took over, one of the things that she immediately had to do was leave. And she brought all of her students with her. And she went, and one of the things I want to note is that Rwanda was one of the countries that opened up borders immediately. And so she established the school she reestablished the school in Rwanda. And the link I have here is actually 60 Minutes did a piece on the school and what their goals are. And I really encourage you to watch that. But I actually have made 2 different visits in 2023 in order to work with SOLA and with the library in order to help organize, build, and create a library space. Because one of the things I have to say about these girls is that despite everything they've gone through, they were teenagers. And they were these fantastic, wonderful teenage girls. And so I wanted to create a space where they could continue to be these wonderful, fantastic teenage girls. Many of them had left family behind. Many of them, were the only member of their family who actually managed to get out of Afghanistan, or their families were in refugee camps in the surrounding areas of Afghanistan. And so they were not only dealing with the trauma of being displaced from their home, but many of them were also then separated from their families. And so this is part of the work I did there. And like I said, one of the things I go back to is these girls were amazing and they've made a lifelong impact on me. But the work that I did there was primarily about the library. And I was actually contacted about this work to come and work with them based on work that I have done actually with other schools in Rwanda. So this wasn't something that was arbitrary, but one of the things I did was I brought books with me. I actually brought something like 7 boxes of books with me to contribute to the library and to go there and work on organizing it. As it was, there actually had been several attempts to organize it and put in some, really kind of have something there, but they didn't have somebody dedicated to the library. So it was kind of up and down, but as you have here, I was organizing what was there. In between my 2 visits, they received a huge donation from Oxford Press. And so I also worked on organizing those materials and splitting them up between what was going to stay in the library, what was going to the classrooms, what would be available for the teachers, and also to some degree of book repair. Because one of the things, Rwanda is an absolutely amazing country, but it is landlocked. So getting anything shipped there is not easy. It generally has to be flown in. It's very expensive to ship. So anytime that I go there, what is happening is I'm bringing materials and I'm bringing them as luggage. So to give you an idea of how things looked before, like I said, it wasn't in bad shape, but it wasn't necessarily well organized and it wasn't easy. And this was the main thing. It wasn't necessarily easy for the girls all the time to figure out what they would feel comfortable reading. The girls came to the school with a wide range of skills in English. And I should say, actually, I didn't say this before, is most of the teaching is done in English because the intent is to have many of the girls go from SOLA to schools in the US and Canada so that they can build to build their education. Although I will say that SOLA has now purchased land in Kigali for a permanent home. And so they're planning to actually develop this into a much larger boarding school for girls, Afghan girls, to come from all over the world. The last time I was there, they had the applications for the next year. They had 31 spots and there were 1,000 applications. So they're really trying to meet a need of families who want their girls to be educated, but also to be someplace that is relatively safe. So that was one of the goals here. But as I said, what you see here is how it was before. Like I said, it wasn't in bad shape, but it wasn't necessarily organized as well as it could be. And one of the things I knew from my previous work with schools in Rwanda with books in English is the girls were hesitant sometimes because they didn't necessarily feel that they would find the readings based on what they were comfortable with. I wanted to make it easy and I didn't want them to feel, for lack of a better word, or feel uncomfortable or ashamed or feel like they picked something up and they should be able to do it when perhaps it was beyond their level at that time. And so one of the things I did, and this is based on work that I had previously done, was arrange the fiction by reading level to give the students an idea of how they could select the items and what might be what might be the best for them to approach. And, all of this is also based on where they felt they were comfortable, but also their reading levels within the school. And I will also point out that one of the things that Shabana thinks is incredibly important, and she stresses very hard, is they also still have classes in their native languages, in the native languages of Afghanistan, so that they're not losing their culture, but one of the things, the importance of having the books in English is so that they gain mastery of English so that they can engage on a global scale. Right or wrong, English does tend to be a universal language, especially in terms of business and global engagement. So this is part of what I did afterwards, is that setting things up, having the arrangement better, having the nonfiction collection in better sense. But more than that, I also tried to arrange it. Now, I will point out that the school is in a former hotel, so you're not necessarily what you might see traditional library spaces. But I tried to working with the faculty and the administration, and also, paying attention to how the girls use the space. That was one of the biggest things. With the first trip I was there, I would pay attention to when they'd come up, how they would use the space, how they would be comfortable. I should also note that the library is a space where the girls go to at between 4 and 5 o'clock every day, and for 2 hours on Sunday when they get their cell phones so they can talk to their families. So I also wanted to make sure that these are spaces where the girls could feel comfortable. They could have they could find little places they could sit. They could enjoy themselves collaboratively, the things that they could do, join and kind of do in these spaces, and be able to browse the books, be able to come in and do work, to be able to be comfortable, whether it was for schoolwork or for, like I said, when they're actually going in to speak with their families or to be on the phones. And you don't see it here, but one of the big things that I really advocated for was making sure that we had a lot of plugs. Because one of the things I found is that the girls would hang around the walls, because that's where they could plug in their computers and their phones. And I tried to make sure that we could run power strips so that they could sit on the couches, they could sit at the tables, and that they could, they could make it their space. And that was part of my goal in what I was doing with the library. I also, in the books that I brought, I reached out to a lot of former students who worked in libraries, that I could go through their collections. I tried to make sure what I was bringing was not just American, because for all that this was places that I know many of them were hoping to go for school, I want to make sure they had a range of books. And when I was there the first time, I talked with the girls about titles that they wanted to see, and I tried to bring some things through, Afghan authors or Asian and African authors as much as possible, so that it was getting a bigger diversity. And I know I've gone through this quickly, but I know we're running a little late. This is one of the reasons why I do this, is when I left the first time, these were posters that the students made for me and let me know that, much of what was going on, they really enjoyed what was brought in. They really wanted to be able to use the library both as a space and as a place for reading and for learning. And like I said, these girls, they stick with you. They've been amazing. And I'm returning to Rwanda shortly actually for a separate reason, but I am working to be able to go by and see where they are, and maybe see what I can do as next steps, either from the US or perhaps going back to Rwanda again to work with them. So that's the end of my presentation. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Lisa. That was short and sweet. And last but not least, we're going to have Anna Ndumo. Her presentation is titled Partnerships and Power, Reflections on the ILPI Project Amid Hardline Anti-Immigrant Policies. Take it away, Anna.
Hi, everyone. I'm going to test myself and see if I can do this in 5 to 10 minutes. So if I go way too fast, please don't hesitate to contact me. I'm happy to schedule a one-on-one or just get to meet some of our colleagues here. So today I'll be talking about a project that unfortunately stopped midway as a result of hardline anti-immigrant policies, in addition to so many anti-diversity efforts. So this project just sundowned. We got stop work orders, and it's very heartening to see so many of the students here today. I did not expect that. So if you are a certificate holder, or if you were not able to complete, which was very understandable, please just share your experience. We're so glad you're here. Some of the advisors are also here. So my name is Anna Ndumu. I'm an assistant professor at the University of Maryland, and I direct a project called the Improving Library Partnerships with Immigrants. So this project is a little different. Instead of focusing on the people we serve and our newest neighbors, we felt, and there was a lot of demand for librarians to get greater training. There's a lot of library workers who are thrust into positions of immigrant outreach or refugee outreach with very little training. There's very little on-the-job training, very little training in Masters in Library and Information Studies programs here in the U.S. context. So I am here in the United States, and we don't have very many classes to learn how to do this work. So we created a professional development offering. And so what I'll talk to you about very fast is the project's origins and the co-design process, the learning context, and some reflections that I have. So, we're celebrating World Refugee Day, or soon here in the United States is Immigrant Heritage Month, and the theme is solidarity. And so the project position is that all Americans, and we took this bold stance of Americans being defined as longtime residents or newly arrived immigrants. They're all valued citizens who are vital to the creation of a shared future and the success of our communities. Libraries play an important and unique role in helping communities become more welcoming. I was really provoked by Despina's question: if the library is society's living room, who doesn't have a seat? So we really need to peel back and look at some of our philosophies and some of our norms in libraries. So the Library Integration in New Americans Project was a grant-funded project to create a pilot MLIS course on how to serve immigrant communities, along with the workbook for immigrant advocacy groups and nonprofits on really information hygiene and digital practices to stay safe. And then a self-paced mini course. Today, I'll be talking to you about mainly the self-paced mini course for librarians. So we started with preliminary data, and we sent out a survey, and many librarians felt that they don't know really what it means to migrate from one country to another and to adjust to that culture. They don't have that experience, and none of their recent relatives have that experience. So they couldn't really determine what was the difference between assimilation and acculturation, which is losing your culture. Assimilating versus acculturating means that you can juggle two cultures, your culture of origin and your new society. And then naturalization, which is becoming a citizen. So many knew what that meant, but they didn't know what information does in terms of overall immigrant wellness in the acculturation process. And there were many statistics like this. I also conducted an environmental scan. I want to stop here and just give a shout out to Haley, who's a research assistant here today, and this work wouldn't have been possible without her. So we looked at migration studies, where migration studies and population studies, they handle this all the time. They talk about acculturation all the time. We really don't in library and information science. So acculturation is, Rudman actually said, information has rarely been seen for its effectiveness as a method of second culture learning. And Kim theorized that the acculturative process means curiosity, searching out of necessity and going beyond the customary information. It necessitates that. We ask immigrants what they think about acculturating and information and libraries in that process. They look for ease, familiarity, and the latest resources. Overwhelmingly, we also got immigrant organizers and nonprofits perspectives, and they shared that acculturation and information in libraries promotes economic support, educational resources, language access, digital literacy, And then finally, we looked at what is being taught in our curriculum for training new librarians. And there's only 2 courses that exclusively of the syllabi that we had access to that focus exclusively on outreach to immigrants. So we're really not trained in this area. We conducted co-design sessions with librarians at several conferences. And these are just some of the quotes we got. Immigrants are not just attending language classes, they're coming for all of our programs. So we don't need to just relegate and keep immigrants and refugees in a box. By the way, by new Americans, I mean asylees, refugees, and anyone else in vulnerable status. So new Americans means anyone who is new to this country. Another quote, one thing that I would love as a professional resource, which I haven't been able to find, is help with the process of acculturation for librarians, because I think more and more people working in small communities in the US are encountering much more diverse patrons. So again, people are asking for learning content exclusively to help them better serve our newest neighbors. And what guided us in this project is, what do you wish you learned during your LIS education, or if you're a current student, or if you're a library worker, what do you wish you learned on the job as you started to do this work of immigrant outreach or refugee outreach? Or if you are an immigrant working in libraries, what do you wish your colleagues knew about you or your community's experience? This is one of the co-design sessions alongside librarians. Some of the activities including asking what should the mini course, how should it be structured? We also asked, do you prefer 4 15-minute lessons or 6 10-minute lessons? They ultimately decided on 6 10-ish minutes. The lectures were a little long sometimes because the content was heavy, as I'll show you. And then, do you prefer a standalone website or maybe a learning management system? These are some of the decisions they made. And again, we held these workshops, and what we ultimately came up with was this course here. We started with just 50 seats, and due to demand, we tripled it. So we had 150 seats. And even then, people were asking, when is the next cohort, please? Because I've just been designated the immigrant and refugee outreach librarian. So the lessons were on traditional library service to immigrants. Library service in the US began as an Americanization engine, basically. During the time, 100 years ago, there was really a lot of political pressure to indoctrinate immigrants into a particular political ideology. And so when we understand that, we can see how immigrant policy has kind of run parallel to library service. When there's anti-immigration policy, there's very little library development in this area, and so on and so forth. The next lesson is on the immigration policy maze. We also heard that we just can't keep up with policy, and we just didn't know that there are 180 different visas in the US across 27 categories. And so you can understand how someone would decide to forgo due process and really come here through an alternate route, because their proportion or their probability of getting a visa is very, very low. So again, the first 3 lessons are just foundational. So what is immigrant acculturation? You can be separated, integrated, assimilated, or marginalized. Those are the 4 according to migration studies. Then we talked about, how do we do this differently? Transformative immigrant engagement. We look at privacy as a very strong ethic, even now. And there was a question in the chat box about this. There's a cool game created by a researcher at the University of Washington in the United States called Mind of 5. How do you protect migrants' rights to immigration information privacy? That's a really cool game. And so those are the kinds of simulations we include. Then compassion fatigue, cultural competence. I'll skip a few slides. In addition to the course, we provide a digest to stay abreast of immigration policy. This is almost 2 years old, so pre-current administration. We were distilling this for busy library workers, just a 2-pager, saying, hey, this is what statelessness means. This is what in the US parole means. This is what internationally asylum means. And these are the changes that have happened. As you can imagine, the research assistant who is assigned to this has been very, very busy since January. And we also have a listserv for people to share ideas and to share hacks or ask questions on how would you approach this. Again, a lot of people have adopted this new role because of a lot of migration changes in the US. And so my reflections very quickly. There's a need to improve library norms instead of focusing on fixing immigrants and refugees, and really approaching this from a place of abundance, and understanding what are some of the push and pull factors that cause people to migrate. So really changing some of our baseline knowledge as a profession. There's a lot of sometimes naivete, understandably, when we haven't covered this in professional development or courses. And then for some people, professional development means professional risk. And so a few people dropped the course because they felt that it was too radical. In the United States, there's a word that has been weaponized called woke. So they opted out of the course, but still wanted to learn the content. We offered certificates and micro badging, which is called a micro credentialing, so a digital badge. Some people said, I'll take the course, but I don't want those things. And so what we have found is that there's a soft community of resistance where people are still holding their language classes and so much more, even in the face of decreased funding, maybe adversarial library boards, communities that are xenophobic. So they're still keeping on, just holding their stock services toward or for immigrant and refugee communities. And so we need stronger policy making, capital P at the national level, but also lowercase p in our own library systems. So we need some structures. And oddly enough, we submitted a grant to continue this work to create a library standard for library service in the United States. We had no idea that the IFLA standard was coming out. This started last summer. So what we heard from a lot of library directors is, I can't advocate for a new wing or a line item for refugee and immigrant services if we don't have a standard through the American Library Association. And in the course, we were able to include lesson 5 has the IFLA standard, and students analyzed it. So I want to thank Autolos, SRIDP, and Derek, who's here, Reforma, Apollo, BCALA, so many of our partners, and especially to Project Welcome for inviting me here today. And I think we have 5 minutes for questions. Thanks again.
Thank you, everyone, for attending today. I'd like to just a quick question. How much time do we have left for questions? We're having questions coming in, so I just want to make sure that I'm respectful of everyone's time here.
Yes, we have 5 minutes and 1 minute to wrap up, but what we would also invite, if those speakers are able to stay beyond the time and people would like to, have continued discussion, we can allow for that, but we'll finish on time. And then we'll also stop recording, so then people are welcome for this facilitation that Derek is going to do.
Okay, thank you again. Thank you, Clara. My name is Derek Wilmot Montoya. I'm with the University of Toledo in Ohio, and I'm with the American Library Association Services to Refugees, Immigrants, Displaced Persons Subcommittee. So I'm going to start off with the question.